My sister sounded proud when she called me. She said she'd finally been promoted, and she wanted to celebrate with the people who mattered most. When she invited me to dinner, I didn't hesitate. She was my sister. Of course I'd be there. The restaurant she chose was expensive, the kind with dim lighting, white tablecloths, and a private room reserved just for her. Her coworkers, her boss, even a few family friends were already seated when I arrived. She hugged me, smiled wide, and introduced me as the sister who's always supported me. During the night, she gave a speech about sacrifice, ambition, and how hard she'd worked to get where she was. Everyone applauded. Glasses clinked. Then the server brought the bill. My sister didn't even look at it. She slid it across the table toward me and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You don't mind covering this, right?" That's when I realized this wasn't a celebration. It was a setup. Growing up, my sister Rachel was always the one everyone talked about. She was the achiever, the straight-A student, the one teachers remembered by name and relatives bragged about at every family gathering. When people asked my parents about their kids, Rachel came first. I usually came second if I was mentioned at all. I learned early how our roles worked. Rachel succeeded. I supported. If she needed help studying, I stayed up late with her. If she needed someone to listen after a bad day at work, I picked up the phone. If she needed money just for a little while, I sent it without asking questions. She always promised she'd pay me back. Sometimes she did. Sometimes she didn't. And when she didn't, she'd laugh it off and say, "You know how sisters are." And I did. Or at least I thought I did. As adults, the dynamic didn't change. It just got dressed up in nicer words. Rachel became ambitious, polished, impressive. She worked long hours, chased titles, and talked endlessly about how hard she pushed herself. I admired that about her. I really did. So when she called me that afternoon, her voice bright and buzzing with excitement, I was genuinely happy for her. "I finally got the promotion," she said. "I'm leading my own team now." I congratulated her immediately, told her how proud I was. I meant every word. "That's why I want you there tonight," she added. "I'm having a small celebration dinner. I want my sister by my side." That sentence landed softly in my chest. It felt intimate. Important. She didn't say anything about money. She didn't mention costs or expectations. She just said she wanted to celebrate and that she'd already picked the place. When she told me the restaurant's name, I hesitated for half a second. It was expensive, far more upscale than anywhere we usually went, but she brushed it off. "Relax," she said. "It's a special night." I told myself I was overthinking it. After all, she was my sister. And sisters didn't set traps for each other. At least that's what I believed back then. The restaurant was even more impressive than I expected. Soft golden light reflected off polished glass and white tablecloths. The kind of place where the menus didn't list prices and the servers spoke in hushed, confident tones. When I gave Rachel's name at the front desk, the hostess smiled and led me to a private dining room tucked away from the main floor. The room was already half full. Rachel was seated at the head of the table, laughing loudly, a champagne flute in her hand. Around her sat people I recognized from stories she told me, her co-workers, a few managers, even her boss. They all looked polished and expensive, like they belonged there. When Rachel saw me, she stood up immediately. "There you are," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Everyone, this is my sister, Emily." She said it like a title. "She's been there for me through everything," Rachel added. "I couldn't have done this without her." A few people smiled at me. Someone nodded approvingly. I felt a strange mix of pride and discomfort settle in my stomach. Before I could say anything, a server appeared and refilled Rachel's glass. She barely glanced at him before saying, "Another bottle for the table." Then she turned back to her audience, already launching into a story about late nights, impossible deadlines, and how she'd earned every inch of her success. More people arrived. The room filled quickly, and with each new guest, Rachel's energy grew. She ordered appetizers without asking anyone. Truffle plates, oysters, things I didn't recognize but knew were expensive. When the menus were passed around, she waved her hand casually. "Get whatever you want," she told the table. "Tonight's a celebration." The words sounded generous, confident, final. I watched as people ordered steaks, seafood, cocktails that came with long descriptions, and even longer price tags. Rachel nodded along, smiling, encouraging. She ordered another bottle of wine, then another. At one point, she leaned toward me and squeezed my hand. "Can you believe this?" she whispered. All those years of work finally paying off. I smiled back, trying to ignore the tightening feeling in my chest. I assumed the company was covering it, or that Rachel had planned for this. Why wouldn't she? This was her promotion, her party. She stood up halfway through dinner, tapped her glass, and gave a short speech about ambition and sacrifice. About never settling. about knowing your worth and demanding more. Everyone applauded. Glasses clinked. I clapped too, unaware that I was sitting in the front row of something I never agreed to be part of. And when the server finally disappeared to retrieve the bill, I had no idea my role in the evening was about to change completely. The mood didn't shift all at once. It happened quietly, almost politely. The server returned holding a black leather folder, his expression calm and professional. He walked straight toward Rachel, stopping just beside her chair. For a split second, I relaxed. Of course. This was her night. Her promotion. Her celebration. But Rachel didn't reach for the folder. She didn't even look at it. Instead, she glanced at me, smiled, and gently nudged the folder across the table in my direction. "You don't mind covering this, right?" she said. Her voice was light, casual, loud enough for everyone to hear. At first, I honestly thought I'd misheard her. The room went quiet in that subtle way that only happens when people sense something interesting unfolding. A few heads turned. Someone let out a small laugh, like it was a joke they were waiting to understand. I stared at the folder, then at Rachel. "What?" I whispered. She tilted her head, still smiling. "You earn more than I do," she said. "And you've always supported me. Think of it as your way of celebrating my promotion." The words landed like a slap. Before I could respond, someone down the table said, "Wow, that's so generous." Another person nodded. "You're an amazing sister." My stomach dropped. Rachel leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate, not private. "Don't make this awkward," she murmured. "Everyone's watching." I felt the heat rush to my face. 20 pairs of eyes were suddenly fixed on me, expectant and curious. No one looked uncomfortable. No one questioned it. They all assumed this had been agreed on. The server stood patiently beside me, the folder resting inches from my hands. I opened it. The total stared back at me in clean, unforgiving numbers. $7,843. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up at Rachel, hoping, stupidly, that she'd laugh and say she was kidding. That this was some strange misunderstanding. Instead, she gave me a reassuring nod. "Relax," she said. "It's not a big deal for you. Not a big deal." My mind raced. If I refused, I'd be the cheap sister. The jealous one. The woman who ruined her sister's big night. If I argued, it would be public. Messy. Unforgettable. Rachel knew that. She reached over and squeezed my arm, the gesture looking affectionate to anyone watching. Her nails pressed into my skin. "You're proud of me," she said softly. "Right?" I felt trapped. Humiliated. Cornered in a room full of strangers who suddenly believed they were entitled to my silence. So, I did the only thing that wouldn't explode the moment. I took out my credit card. The server smiled and thanked me. The table broke into applause. Someone raised their glass and toasted my generosity. Rachel leaned over and kissed my cheek. "This is why I love you," she said. I smiled back, my face stiff, my hands shaking just enough that I had to press them together under the table. As the server walked away with my card, one thought repeated itself in my head, louder than the applause around me. She didn't ask. She decided. And she never expected me to say no. The applause faded. Conversations slowly picked back up. Plates were cleared, and dessert menus appeared like nothing unusual had happened. I sat there, nodding when people spoke to me, smiling when someone thanked me again for treating everyone. My credit card came back in the leather folder, warm in my hands, as if it still carried the heat of the moment. Rachel, on the other hand, looked radiant. She laughed louder than before, leaned back in her chair, completely at ease. When the night finally wound down and people started standing to leave, she wrapped an arm around my shoulders like we'd just shared something special. "You really came through for me tonight," she said. "I won't forget this." I didn't answer. In the car, the silence pressed in on me. Streetlights flashed across the windshield as Rachel talked nonstop about how impressed her boss was, how this promotion was only the beginning, how everything was finally lining up for her. Not once did she mention the bill. When I finally cleared my throat and said her name, she glanced over, still smiling. "What?" she asked. "I didn't know I was paying tonight," I said carefully. "You didn't even ask me." Her smile faltered, just for a second, before she sighed and shook her head. "Don't start," she said. "Why are you making this about money?" "I just paid almost $8,000, I replied. "I think I'm allowed to talk about it." She scoffed softly. "Emily, come on. You make good money. It's not like it hurt you." That sentence settled heavy in my chest. "That's not the point," I said. "You put me on the spot. In front of everyone." Rachel rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. Families support each other. I thought you'd be proud to help me celebrate." "Proud." She said it like a weapon. "You should be happy for me," she continued. "This promotion benefits all of us in the long run. I mean, Don't you want me to succeed? The words twisted something inside me. Suddenly, my discomfort wasn't about what she'd done. It was about my failure to be supportive enough. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I went quiet. Rachel seemed satisfied with that. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was still half asleep. A text from Rachel. Hey, I was thinking, now that I'll be meeting with higher-ups, I need a new laptop.
Minus basically din.
Can you help me out? I stared at the screen. Another message followed before I could respond. Think of it as continuing the celebration.
Something clicked then.
Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough to hurt. This wasn't about one dinner. It wasn't even about money. It was about how easily she decided what I owed her. How naturally she stepped into the role of being celebrated while assigning me the role of paying for it, financially, emotionally, quietly. I thought back to all the times she'd borrowed money. All the favors that never went both ways. All the moments I'd swallowed discomfort because calling it out felt harder than letting it go. I set my phone down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask a question I'd avoided for years. If this were anyone else, any friend, any partner, would I accept being treated this way? The answer came immediately.
No.
And that realization didn't calm me. It ignited something. Rachel thought the story was over. She thought I'd paid, absorbed the humiliation, and moved on like always. What she didn't know was that she'd just shown me exactly how she saw me. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. I didn't confront Rachel again. Not right away. That was the surprising part, even to myself. Instead of arguing, instead of demanding an apology I already knew I wouldn't get, I did what I'd always done best. I played along. I waited a full day before replying to her message about the laptop. When I finally did, I kept my tone light, almost enthusiastic. Of course, I texted back. I've been thinking about your promotion too. You really deserve to be celebrated properly. Her response came immediately. I knew you'd understand. That sentence told me everything. A few hours later, I called her. I've been feeling bad about how rushed the dinner was, I said. It was so work-focused. You barely got to enjoy it. Rachel hummed thoughtfully on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her smiling. So I was thinking, I continued. What if we did something bigger? Something more personal. Friends. Family. A real celebration. There was a pause. Then a sharp intake of breath. Really? She asked. You do that? I want to, I said. You've worked so hard. I want everyone to see that. She laughed, delighted. Oh my God, yes. That would be amazing. From that moment on, Rachel took over, just like she always did. She sent me links to venues before I even asked. Rooftop bars. Private spaces with skyline views. Places that looked expensive just scrolling past the photos. She talked excitedly about who to invite, how many people would come, how important it was that everything looked perfect. This is a big moment for me, she reminded me more than once. I know, I said every time. We settled on a rooftop venue downtown, the kind of place that marketed itself as an experience. Rachel insisted on inviting our parents, a few cousins, her closest friends, and even some people from her office who hadn't made it to the first dinner. 50 people minimum, she said. I wanted to feel big. I let her believe the night was hers to design. Behind the scenes, I made my own quiet arrangements. I spoke to the venue coordinator directly. I asked about their premium packages, their top-shelf drink options, their most popular entrees. I smiled and nodded as she explained how easy it was to upgrade the experience. I told her to encourage guests to order freely, to recommend the best items, the most expensive ones. Don't worry about the bill, I said calmly. We want everyone to feel taken care of. Rachel didn't ask for details. She never did. To her, this was just another extension of the same story, the one where she shined and I supported, where she stood at the center, and I handled whatever needed handling quietly in the background. In the days leading up to the party, she couldn't stop talking about it. She sent me photos of the outfit she planned to wear. A new dress. A new blazer. She mentioned how proud she was that I was finally stepping up for her. You've really grown, she said once. I love how supportive you've become. I smiled when I read that message. By then, my anger had sharpened into something else. Something steady. Focused. This wasn't about revenge. It was about symmetry. Rachel believed celebrations were paid for by the people who supported you. She believed money flowed upward, toward the person being admired. She believed pressure and public expectation were acceptable tools, as long as she wasn't the one under them. I wasn't inventing a new lesson. I was simply preparing to return the one she'd already taught me. And the night of the party, as I stood in the elevator, heading up to that rooftop, listening to the hum of anticipation in my chest, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't nervous. I was calm. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to Rachel's behavior. I was responding to it on my own terms. The rooftop was stunning. City lights stretched out beneath us like a sea of glass and gold. Soft music played in the background, and servers moved gracefully between tables carrying trays of champagne. Everything looked exactly the way Rachel wanted it to look: expensive, polished, impressive. She arrived late on purpose. When the elevator doors opened and Rachel stepped out, conversations paused. Heads turned. She wore a tailored blazer over a sleek dress, her hair perfectly styled, confidence radiating off her like perfume. People clapped. Someone whistled. "This is my night," she said, laughing as she accepted a glass of champagne. "I hope you're all ready to celebrate." I stood a few steps back, watching. Rachel floated through the crowd, hugging relatives, greeting friends, basking in admiration. She made sure to mention, more than once, that I had organized everything. "My sister insisted," she said proudly. "She wanted it to be perfect." Everyone smiled at me. Some thanked me directly. I returned each smile calmly, my hands folded neatly in front of me. Dinner began, and just like the first night, the orders escalated quickly. The servers recommended premium cocktails. Guests laughed and waved off menus, trusting the suggestions. Steaks, lobster, top-shelf liquor. Nothing was off-limits. Bottles of wine appeared without hesitation. Rachel didn't stop anyone. Why would she? This was how success was supposed to look. Halfway through the meal, I stood up. I didn't tap my glass. I didn't raise my voice. I simply waited until the room settled naturally, then smiled. "I just want to say a few words," I began. Rachel turned toward me, beaming. She nodded encouragingly, already expecting praise. "My sister has always believed in celebrating success," I said. "She taught me that when someone reaches an important milestone, the best way to honor it is to show generosity, to show confidence." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "She also taught me something else," I continued. "That truly successful people don't wait for others to carry them. They pay their own way." Proudly. Rachel's smile tightened. "So tonight," I said, turning slightly toward her, "Rachel will be demonstrating exactly that, by treating everyone here to dinner in honor of her promotion." For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then the room erupted. Applause.
Cheers.
Laughter. Glasses raised high. Rachel's face drained of color so quickly it was almost shocking. Her mouth opened, then closed. She laughed once, sharp and forced, looking around as if waiting for someone to correct me. No one did. Our parents stood up, clapping enthusiastically. "That's my girl," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "So generous." Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her glass. 50 pairs of eyes were locked onto her now, filled with admiration and expectation. She couldn't refuse. The server approached, smiling warmly. "Would you like to start with another round of champagne for the table?" Rachel hesitated, just long enough for the pause to feel dangerous, then nodded. "Yes," she said. "Of course." I watched her carefully as the night continued. Each new bottle that arrived made her shoulders tense a little more. Each expensive order added another invisible weight. She laughed when people spoke to her, but her eyes kept darting toward the servers, toward the bar, toward anything that reminded her numbers were quietly stacking up. At one point, she excused herself and disappeared toward the restroom. When she returned, her face was pale beneath the warm lights. She barely touched her food. The bill arrived near the end of the night, placed discreetly in front of her. I saw the moment she opened it. Her breath caught. Her jaw tightened, so hard I could see the muscle jump. She flipped the page once, then again, as if hoping the total would change. It didn't. $11,924. Her hands shook as she reached into her purse. The confidence she'd worn all evening slipped, replaced by raw panic she couldn't fully hide. Our father was mid-story, laughing, completely unaware. Rachel slid her credit card into the folder slowly, deliberately, like she was performing the role she'd been trapped into playing. The server thanked her for hosting such a wonderful celebration. The applause returned. Compliments poured in. People told her how inspiring she was, how lucky they were to be there. Rachel smiled. But it wasn't the smile she'd worn all night. It was tight, brittle. A mask held in place by sheer force of will. And as I watched her sit there, trapped by the same pressure she'd once used against me, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not guilt.
Clarity.
She finally understood what it felt like to be put on display, and handed the cost of someone else's success. The moment the last guest stepped into the elevator, Rachel dropped the smile like it had burned her mouth. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, turning on me so fast I barely had time to breathe. The rooftop suddenly felt colder, quieter, empty in a way it hadn't been all night. I didn't answer right away. I watched as she paced, heels clicking sharply against the floor, one hand still clutching her phone like it might explode. "You embarrassed me," she snapped. In front of everyone.
Mom, Dad.
My friends. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I met her eyes calmly. Now you know how I felt. She froze. Then laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. That's completely different, she said. This was my promotion. I worked for it. I earned that celebration. I nodded. So, did you earn the right to hand me the bill without asking? Her mouth opened, then closed. I thought you'd want to help, she said finally. You always do. There it was. Not an apology. An expectation. You didn't ask me, Rachel, I said. You decided. You put me on the spot and used everyone in that room to pressure me.
She scoffed.
Don't be dramatic. You could afford it. That doesn't make it okay. Her voice rose. You make everything about money? No, I said quietly. You make everything about you. That landed harder than I expected. She stopped pacing. Her face flushed red, anger flashing across her features. You set me up, she accused. You planned this. You wanted to hurt me. I wanted you to understand, I replied. And this was the only way you ever would. She shook her head furiously. You could have just talked to me. I tried, I said. You told me I should be proud. You told me families support each other. Then you asked me to buy you a laptop the next day. Her jaw tightened. That was different. I let out a short laugh, sharp and humorless. You keep saying that. But the only difference is that this time, you were the one holding the bill. Silence stretched between us. Rachel looked away, crossing her arms like she was bracing herself. So, what, you think this makes us even? No, I said. It makes us clear. She looked back at me, confusion flickering through her anger. What does that mean? It means I'm done being your safety net, I said. I'm done paying for your milestones so you can feel important. I'm done being the supportive sister when support only ever flows one way. Her voice softened suddenly, slipping into something almost wounded. You're really going to throw our relationship away over this? I shook my head slowly. I'm not throwing it away. I'm finally seeing it for what it is. She opened her mouth to argue again, but nothing came out. For the first time in my life, Rachel didn't have a script. I took a step back, putting physical space where emotional distance already existed. I love you, I said. But I don't owe you my silence, my money, or my dignity. Her eyes hardened. Fine, she said coldly. If that's how you feel. It is, I replied. And as I turned toward the elevator, I realized something I hadn't expected. Walking away didn't feel like losing a sister. It felt like finally standing on my own. The elevator ride down was silent. My reflection stared back at me from the mirrored wall, eyes steady, face calm in a way I barely recognized. My heart was still pounding, but underneath it was something new, something solid. Relief. Rachel didn't text me that night, or the next day. When she finally did, it wasn't an apology. It was a message about how hurt she was, about how I'd embarrassed her, about how she never expected this from her own sister. I read it once, then again, and for the first time, I didn't rush to explain myself. I didn't write back paragraphs defending my intentions or softening my words. I didn't apologize for having boundaries. I simply replied that I needed space and that I wouldn't be paying for anyone else's milestones unless it was something I chose freely. She didn't respond after that. Family gatherings changed after that night. Conversations became more careful, more distant. I noticed how often people expected me to smooth things over, to be the bigger person, the way I always had. This time I didn't. What surprised me most wasn't losing the closeness I thought I had with Rachel. It was realizing how much of that closeness had been built on my willingness to sacrifice myself quietly. Without that role, there was space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to decide who I wanted to be when I wasn't funding someone else's sense of importance. I stopped feeling guilty for saying no. I stopped equating love with endurance. I learned that support given under pressure isn't support, it's extraction. Rachel got her promotion. She got her celebration. And she paid for it. I got something else. I learned that family doesn't mean unlimited access to me. That loyalty doesn't require self-erasure. And that standing up for myself doesn't make me selfish. It makes me honest. I didn't walk away from that rooftop feeling victorious. I walked away feeling clear. Clear about my worth. Clear about my boundaries. Clear about what I will never accept again. And if losing a version of my sister was the cost of keeping my self-respect, it was a price I was finally willing to pay.